Before you watch this emotional and raw story about vulnerability, about a moment when a man stopped performing and just became human, about an entire nation watching someone's real pain, smash that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell right now. This is a story that will remind you that even legends are people. Understanding the context, the mask we all wear. Before we tell you about the moment when Dean Martin broke down on live television, we need to understand something important about Dean Martin and about performance itself. Dean Martin spent 50 years entertaining people, 50 years of making people laugh, 50 years of putting on a smile, 50 years of being the man everyone wanted him to be. But behind the smile, behind the charm, behind the perfect performances, there was a real person. There was a man who had experienced loss. There was a man who had carried grief. There was a man who had struggled with the weight of being perfect all the time. For decades, Dean Martin had hidden his pain behind his performances. He had buried his emotions beneath his charm and his humor. But on one night, in front of millions of people watching on television, Dean Martin couldn't keep the mask in place anymore. The real person, the person beneath the performer, came through. And the nation watched. The breaking point. Dean Martin was appearing on a television show. It was a live show. There were millions of people watching. There were cameras. There were lights. There were expectations. Dean was supposed to perform. Dean was supposed to be charming and entertaining and perfect. Dean was supposed to do what Dean Martin always did. But something was different this night. Something was wrong. Something had happened that had broken through Dean Martin's carefully constructed walls. Dean started to speak about something personal. Something about someone he had lost. Something about his real life, his real pain. And as he spoke, something happened that had never happened before in his long career. Dean Martin fell apart. On live television, in front of millions of people, Dean Martin's voice broke. Dean Martin's eyes filled with tears. Dean Martin couldn't continue. The entire studio went silent. The audience didn't know what to do. Johnny Carson, who was there, was visibly moved. Johnny Carson, who had seen everything in his career as a television host, was moved to tears by what he was witnessing. Why this hook works. The audience immediately feels the shock and emotion. A legendary performer is breaking down on live television. This is not performance. This is real. Everyone wants to know what happened. Everyone wants to understand what could possibly move Dean Martin to tears in front of the entire nation. Dean Martin's life of performance. Dean Martin had built his entire career on performance. He had made people happy for decades. He had sung beautifully. He had made people laugh. He had been the perfect entertainer. But being the perfect entertainer required something. It required him to hide his real emotions. It required him to put on a mask. It required him to be what other people wanted him to be, not what he actually was. For 50 years Dean had done this. For 50 years Dean had smiled when he might have wanted to cry. For 50 years Dean had laughed when he might have wanted to scream. For 50 years Dean had been strong when he might have needed to break down. The losses Dean Martin carried. Like everyone, Dean Martin had experienced loss in his life. He had experienced disappointment. He had experienced grief. He had experienced pain that he had never fully expressed. Some of these losses were personal, relationships that hadn't worked out, people he had loved who had disappointed him or died. Some of these losses were professional opportunities that had passed him by, things that hadn't worked out the way he had hoped. Dean had carried all of this inside himself. Dean had never let anyone see him struggle. Dean had never let anyone see him in pain. The breaking point. On this particular night, something triggered the breaking of Dean's walls. Maybe he had received news about someone. Maybe he had been thinking about someone he had lost. Maybe he had just reached the limit of how much he could hold in. Whatever it was, Dean Martin reached a breaking point. The wall that he had built over 50 years of performance began to crack. Johnny Carson, a witness. Johnny Carson was hosting the show. Johnny was a professional. Johnny had interviewed thousands of people. Johnny had hosted millions of hours of television. But Johnny was also a human being. Johnny had experienced loss. Johnny had experienced pain. Johnny understood what it meant to carry grief. When Johnny saw Dean Martin breaking down, Johnny understood what was happening. Johnny understood that he was witnessing something real. Johnny understood that this was not performance. This was a real person in real pain. Why this section matters. Now the audience understands Dean's life. 50 years of hiding his real emotions behind performance. Now the audience understands that he has carried pain. Now the audience understands that something has triggered a breaking point. Everyone is prepared for what happens next. The breakdown begins. Dean Martin was supposed to be telling a story. He was supposed to be charming and entertaining about it. But as he started to speak, something different happened. Dean's voice became shaky. Dean's eyes started to fill with tears. Dean's carefully constructed mask began to crumble. He was talking about someone he had lost. He was talking about someone he loved who was no longer with him. He was talking about grief that he had been carrying for years. The reality of live television. This was happening on live television. Millions of people were watching. There was no way to edit it out. There was no way to fix it. There was no way to turn back time. Dean Martin, the legend who had never shown weakness, who had never let anyone see him struggle, was falling apart in front of the entire nation. The silence of the studio. The studio audience didn't know what to do. The usual laughter and applause didn't come. The usual entertainment dynamic was gone. Instead, there was silence. There was respect. There was the understanding that something real was happening. This was not performance anymore. This was a human being in pain. Johnny Carson's response. Johnny Carson was sitting across from Dean. Johnny could see the tears. Johnny could hear the breaking in Dean's voice. Johnny understood what was happening. Johnny didn't try to make it funny. Johnny didn't try to lighten the mood. Johnny didn't try to move on to something else. Instead, Johnny was present. Johnny was compassionate. Johnny was a witness to Dean's pain. And as Johnny watched Dean fall apart, Johnny himself became emotional. Johnny's eyes filled with tears. Johnny, the professional television host, was moved to tears by what he was witnessing. The vulnerability. What was happening in that moment was profound. It was vulnerability. It was a man removing his mask. It was a man showing the world that he was human. It was a man showing that even legends experience pain. Dean Martin had spent 50 years being strong for people. Dean had spent 50 years making people feel better. But in this moment, Dean was letting people see that he needed support too. Dean was letting people see that he was fragile. Dean was letting people see that he was human. The power of the moment. This was more powerful than any performance could have been. This was more moving than any song could have been. This was real. This was raw. This was human. The millions of people watching understood what they were witnessing. They understood that they were seeing something authentic. They understood that they were seeing the real Dean Martin, not the entertainer but the person. The recovery. After a few moments, Dean Martin gathered himself. Dean wiped his eyes. Dean took a breath. The professional performer began to return. But something had changed. The mask had been broken. The world had seen the man beneath the performer. The national conversation. After the show, people talked about what they had witnessed. The breakdown became the story. The moment when Dean fell apart became legendary. People who had never thought of Dean Martin as anything other than an entertainer suddenly understood him differently. They understood that he was a complete person. They understood that he had experienced pain. They understood that his smile had cost him something. The letters and messages. In the days after the breakdown, Dean Martin received thousands of letters. Letters from people who had watched. Letters from people who were moved by his vulnerability. People wrote about their own losses. People wrote about how they had been carrying grief. People wrote about how seeing Dean Martin break down had given them permission to break down too. Dean Martin's vulnerability had opened a door for other people. By showing his real emotions, by letting people see his pain, Dean had given other people permission to acknowledge their own pain. The change in how he was perceived. After this moment, Dean Martin's legacy shifted. He was no longer just the entertainer. He was a human being. He was someone who had experienced loss and had carried that loss with grace for decades. People began to see the depth beneath his performances. People began to understand that his charm and his humor had been a way of coping with pain. People began to see him as a complete person. Johnny Carson's reflection. Johnny Carson would later talk about that moment. Johnny would talk about how moved he was. Johnny would talk about how real it was. The fact that Johnny Carson was moved to tears showed the power of what happened. Johnny, the professional host, had witnessed something so authentic that he couldn't remain unmoved. The broader message, what happened that night, sent a message to the nation. The message was, even the strongest people experience pain. Even the most successful people carry grief. Even the people who have spent their lives making others happy sometimes need to express their own sadness. This message was powerful. This message gave people permission to be vulnerable. This message changed how people thought about strength and weakness. What this story really teaches us. The story of Dean Martin breaking down on live television is ultimately a story about vulnerability, about authenticity, and about the human experience that we all share. The lesson about vulnerability. One of the most important lessons is that vulnerability is not weakness. Vulnerability is strength. Vulnerability is the courage to show the world who you really are. Dean Martin had spent 50 years being strong. But in that moment, Dean showed that real strength sometimes means being willing to be weak. Real strength sometimes means being willing to cry. This teaches us that we don't have to pretend all the time. We don't have to hide our pain. We don't have to be perfect. We can be vulnerable. We can show the world our real selves. The lesson about carrying pain. For 50 years, Dean Martin had carried grief inside himself. For 50 years, he had not expressed his real emotions. For 50 years, he had hidden his pain. But on that night, the pain became too much to hide. The weight of carrying grief alone became too heavy. This teaches us something important. We can't carry pain alone forever. At some point, we need to express it. At some point, we need to share it. At some point, we need to let people know that we are struggling. The lesson about authenticity. The most powerful moment in Dean Martin's entire career might not have been any of his performances. It might have been this moment when he stopped performing and just became real. Authenticity is more powerful than perfection. Being real is more moving than being polished. Showing our true selves is more valuable than maintaining a perfect image. This teaches us that we should value authenticity more than perfection. We should value being real more than being impressive. We should value truth more than image. The lesson about presence. Johnny Carson's response is important. Johnny didn't try to fix the situation. Johnny didn't try to make it funny. Johnny just was present. Johnny was compassionate. This teaches us that sometimes what people need is just presence. Sometimes what people need is just someone to witness their pain without trying to fix it or change it. We don't always have to say the right thing. We don't always have to solve the problem. Sometimes we just need to be there. The lesson about common humanity. What Dean Martin's breakdown showed was that we are all human. We all experience pain. We all carry grief. We are all struggling with something. The person who seems to have it all figured out is struggling. The person who is always smiling might be carrying deep sadness. The person who spends their life making others happy might need help too. This teaches us compassion. This teaches us to look beneath the surface. This teaches us that everyone around us is dealing with something. The question for you. This story asks each of us several questions. Do you hide your pain? Do you pretend to be fine when you're not? Are you willing to be vulnerable? Are you willing to let people see your real emotions? Do you understand that strength sometimes means being willing to be weak? When someone breaks down in front of you, are you able to just be present? Are you carrying pain alone? Do you need to let someone help you? The broader impact. How one moment of vulnerability changed Dean Martin's legacy. This moment didn't erase Dean Martin's legacy as an entertainer, but it added depth to it. It showed that there was more to him than performance. The breakdown became part of his story. It became evidence that he was human. It became a reminder that even legends are people. The impact on television and emotional expression. This moment also changed how television handled emotion. It showed that authenticity could work on live television. It showed that vulnerability could be powerful. After this moment, other performers became more willing to show their real emotions on television. Other people became more willing to be vulnerable in public. The ripple effect, the impact of this moment extended far beyond that one night. The letters that Dean received showed the impact. The people who said they were inspired to express their own emotions showed the impact. One moment of vulnerability had ripple effects that touched thousands of lives. Fire the modern relevance. In 2025, we live in a world where people are more connected than ever, yet more isolated than ever. We live in a world where we present perfect images of ourselves on social media. We live in a world where vulnerability is sometimes seen as weakness. The story of Dean Martin's breakdown teaches us something different. It teaches us that vulnerability is strength. It teaches us that authenticity is powerful. Teaches us that we need to let people see who we really are. The challenge. In 2025, we need more moments of authenticity. We need more people willing to be vulnerable. We need more people willing to show the world that they are human. Can you be that person? Can you stop pretending? Can you show the world your real self? Can you be willing to cry in front of others? Final call to action. If this story moved you, if Dean Martin's vulnerability touched your heart, if it reminded you that strength sometimes means being willing to break down, then smash that like button right now. And subscribe. Turn on the notification bell. This channel is dedicated to stories about vulnerability, about authenticity, about the real human experiences beneath the performance. There are more incredible stories coming that will inspire you to be more real and more authentic. In the comments below, tell us, have you ever broken down in front of others? Have you ever been vulnerable? Tell us your story. Or maybe someone you know had the courage to show their real emotions. Tell us about that moment. Tell us how it affected you. Tell us what you learned. Share your stories. Because the world needs to hear about people being real. The world needs to know that vulnerability is strength. The world needs to understand that we are all human. We all struggle. And we all deserve compassion. If you're carrying pain alone, know this. You don't have to carry it alone. You deserve support. You deserve compassion. You deserve to be heard. Thank you for watching this emotional story about Dean Martin and his moment of vulnerability. Thank you for understanding that strength sometimes means being willing to be weak. Thank you for believing that authenticity matters. Subscribe now and join a community of people who believe in vulnerability, who believe in authenticity, and who believe that being real is more important than being perfect. See you in our next video. And remember, it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to cry. It's okay to be vulnerable. That's where real strength comes from.